Oh,
This is the Unrationed Podcast. My name is Evan.
I'm Josh.
And I am Tony.
Your voice was really fitting for your setting right now.
Yeah.
You look very I am Tony, like with your espresso in your hand. Is that an espresso?
Americano.
Americano.
Just, espresso and water. So, yes. But
There you go.
also, no.
Deal. All right. Josh, what's your wild moment from the week?
All right. So yeah, my wild moment from the week. I'm gonna have to go with last night for Halloween. My son Noah, who's 2 years old, dressed up as a T-Rex, and he's insane. The kid is just like, the only way to describe him is wild. And so like everywhere he goes, he's running. He like is highly coordinated for a 2-year-old. And so he's like jumping off of steps after he gets candy. And he would do the sweetest thing last night. He would go up and I'd have to remind him to say like trick or treat and thank you. But on his own accord, as he's like walking off of the like front porch, everybody did this too. He'd pause and he'd turn around and he just waved to them. It was the cutest thing. Just this little like green T-Rex pause, and he's just got this like sweet little like sweet. So anyways, just watch. I mean, both of them were watching was really cool. They were both dinosaurs. But Noah just had like a special energy about him last night that just like he was so excited, so wild. And so yeah, I'd have to go with that as my wild moment for the week. Tony, how about you?
Halloween is a good one. I'm gonna go with yesterday, I guess being a first day of as an entrepreneur. Is that right? Was it? Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you yeah, I think so. I mean, you're no longer my boss, Josh. Is that right?
I feel like yesterday was your first full day that you acknowledged, accepted, and are committing to the path of being an entrepreneur.
I think that's right. And it reminded me of this moment back in 2013 after I uh, quit my job, sold all my stuff, took a backpack and a one-way ticket to Bangkok, um, intending to spend a year uh, just traveling and doing things other than having a job. To my idea back then was to see what would happen if I freed up the time and energy um, to see to see what else was possible. And there was a moment back then, about a month after I left, where I had had these anxieties around what other people would think, or um what people might say to me, like, and there came a moment where it just sort of clicked that nobody was paying attention to me, that nobody actually cared what I was doing, that nobody was coming to uh, really for better or worse. Like I was on my own in a new way, and what was going to happen going forward was up to me. And I felt that feeling yesterday afternoon as well, in a way that was again fresh, and it's an exhilarating feeling um, of like, okay, like, let's do this. Because there is no cavalry coming. It's yeah, let's go.
Hmm. It's like that moment whenever we realize, or the many moments, I guess, we realize the world revolves around something other than us. I think that's one of the things from Adam's Return, one of those acceptance, that it's like this dual you are not important and you are important acceptance. That's what that reminded me of, and I think we've touched on that. My wild moment from the week was, so we had my brother and sister-in-law and their two kids stay the night on Friday for like kind of a Halloween celebration. They have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. We've got a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So we had 4 kids running around having an awesome time. And so they, you know, uh, my daughter and her cousin slept in the same room, and we were really curious what that was going to be like. It was our first time doing a sleepover, like staying in the same room. We shut the lights off, and those kids were just out. They played so hard. There was no like
So
post going to bed playing, which we were all expecting. Like, oh, they're just gonna play for a while before they go to. No, they were out, and they slept a long time. So the wild moment, my wild moment, actually came the next day. My brother and sister-in-law and their kids, they were going to this outdoor mall for some trick-or-treating on Saturday morning, and Grace and the kids and I were staying home just to kind of be at the house, clean up, do our thing. And Olive, my daughter, our daughter, was like, I want to go with them. And we were like, all right, do you guys care if she goes with you? And they're like, no, she can come with us. It's like, okay, well, put on your costume. So she puts on this Elsa costume. My wife braids her hair. She's just amped, unbelievably excited. And she gets in the car and she goes, and my wife and I are just in tears. Like, our daughter just wanted to go somewhere where we're not going to be. And she's like, there she goes. And it was a very odd feeling that I think we'll have a lot of those feelings. And it goes back to the fatherhood thing. I think we talked about whether, I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before, but it is like setting those boundaries and then being okay when they cross. It's like, for a while, you don't go anywhere without dad. And now you're going to a mall, getting candy from strangers without dad. And it's pretty nutty. And it was good and right. It wasn't a bad thing. It was amazing. So the tears were like joyful and emotional, and like eye-opening of just how quick kids kind of grow up. So that was my wild moment from the week.
it's great.
Last night, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it goes by fast.
Yeah. Last night, my mother-in-law came over and interviewed me for a research paper she's writing. She's getting her master's degree and is writing a paper on finishing well. So this is top of mind for me. I thought we could riff on what it means to finish well in this episode. And she said something interesting to me as we began the interview, which is she found it hard. She's having difficulty getting men to answer these questions, or like getting men to say yes to the interview about finishing well. So like 3 in particular have been like, no thanks. And it like totally caught her off guard. Like, she has a relationship with them, whatever. And so we kind of had a discussion about why that may be. And maybe we can get into that in a minute. But I thought I'd throw out a first question. Josh, Tony, what does it mean to you guys to finish well? Whenever you hear finishing well, what comes to mind?
Well, I have 2 thoughts that immediately come to mind when you say that, and they're both on very opposite ends of the spectrum. The first one that comes to mind is I used to play soccer, played in high school and college, and finishing well always meant like leaving it out on the field, right? It didn't matter if you were down 3-0 and there was 2 minutes to play, you better go, balls to the wall still. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Leave it out on the field. So that comes to mind. And then the other thing that comes to mind is my inconsistent approach on house projects. And so I'm currently in the middle of one right now, which is building built-in bookshelves around my fireplace. And it takes me like 9 months to finish a damn project. Like, this project should have been like a month, maybe, but for whatever reason, I like get all amped up to start doing it. So I like am great at demo. I really enjoy demo days. And then, I started like framing it in, and it just like, I do one little piddly thing, and it's like hard with kids. I could totally blame it on kids, but this has been like my married life of house projects. It's just like, they take 3 to 9 months. And normally I don't finish all of them until we sell the house. So those are the things that come to top of mind when you say finishing well. My wife has a joke. She calls me an 80%er. Like I get the job, the house project 80% of the way there. And then once we sell the house, I'll get it to 100%.
That's really interesting, Josh. Is I am the same way, and that's something where I think of us as different, but we actually are, like it. We were in our current house. We decided to build our bed, and our mattress was on the floor for more than a year, which we were fine with initially because with the kids at the ages they're at, just like letting them use it as a play space, right? Um, but yeah, and actually it was Seville who got that project over. But two things that come to mind for me. One is a race, right? Right, finishing a race well, which tends to, um, for me, look like not necessarily leaving it all out there, but um, I like to think of it as having my last mile be one of my best miles and ending with a smile. That those are the two things. So there's like a quantitative and a qualitative approach to finishing a race well. Um, the speed and the attitude. And then I was thinking creative projects, but house projects are creative projects as well. Um, which is it is the crossing the finish line in a reasonable amount of time. It is that not letting perfectionism get in the way, not letting myself get too distracted. And so it's like laying out how long the thing should take and then adhering to that in a way that things don't drag out the way that Josh or just fall off entirely. So it's like defining what done means, like what good enough means, since perfect is not, attainable. And I know we tend to think in perfection. So it's like, yeah, what's good enough? When is it done? And then when is it reasonable to cross the finish line with those parameters?
You said we tend to think in perfection very nonchalantly, and I don't know that I've ever heard that said, but it rings true. Where did you get that from? Did that come from somewhere? Do you have more to say on we tend to think in perfection, and then how do we go from thinking in perfection to thinking in more realistic, or is there value in thinking in perfection?
This dovetails with the work on creativity
Okay.
and education, where our education system teaches us to pursue the one right answer. And if you provide any answer other than the right answer, you're going to get the red X. So I think we do get trained to think that in that binary, there's right and there's wrong. Right. And if we can find anything wrong or imperfect with what we're doing, then it must not be right. Right. So it's not good enough. And uh, The War of Art, the book I reference more than any other, resistance, that force that pushes back on us when we're trying to put up some shelves or finish a race. It loves perfectionism because we can do that, ad infinitum, right? There's an asymptotic quality to our work where we can approach perfection, but we're never going to get there. And so if we can find imperfections, any little imperfection, resistance can still use that as a way to say, oh, it's not ready. It's not done yet. That's not my problem. If Josh is an 80%er, maybe I'm more like a 63%er, where it's like, yeah.
Evan, how did you respond to your mother-in-law's questions last night?
Yeah, I may have had a tip of the hat from her just because of our conversations leading up to the interview, but I don't know if I was primed or if I was primed in some way, whether it was my mother-in-law or a men's conference that I went to. Not a men's conference. I went to a retreat years ago where I was like one of two men in their 20s, and most of the men in the room were in their 50s and 60s and beyond. And so one of the presentations was titled Finishing Well, and it was very focused on death, like what it means to live a great life and finish life well, which I think everything you two have touched on could be very quickly and easily carried over into that interpretation of finishing well. I don't think there's a right or wrong interpretation of it. So but my initial response was, I think of finishing well, when I think of it, I think of dying, like death being the ultimate finish. And it very quickly moved into the inability we have to know when death is actually going to arrive. So it's this remembering of death, this reminder of death that points me to the present moment. And I think what it means for me to finish well in that context is to be present with what's in front of me at all times, like a loving presence, because we don't know when or where the finish line actually is. So that's not the case for everybody. Some people do know when that finish line is. And I think, Tony, to your point, like the running the last mile, having it be your best mile with a smile on your face. If I were to know when that finish line, where it was going to be, that's how I would like to finish, having it be my best mile with a smile on my face. So maybe I just can constantly run my best mile with a smile on my face, not knowing if I'm going to cross that finish line today or tomorrow. But yeah, that's kind of where my mind went. And then, so I very quickly went to threshold language, though. I didn't like the word finishing, because in everything we've just talked about, the asymptotic, asymptotal, I don't even know how to use that word in the way that you did, Tony. I know asymptote.
Asymptotic. I
Asymptotic.
think is the, yeah, I may be making that up though. And I realized that earlier I used the word cavalry, but that's not even a word. And that's been bothering me since I said that, since the word is cavalry.
Love it. Okay, so the asymptotic nature of finishing, I think, is even like it is more a threshold or a transition from like even a marathon. I think we could use the shelves, the marathon, all the examples you guys were giving, the games. There is a line that is crossed where you're no longer running this marathon, you're now post marathon, but most likely you're still on your feet walking somewhere. Like the distance that you could continue measuring your distance. Who's to say that actually is the finish line? It's very arbitrary in my mind. So I don't like, I got to the point where I wasn't really down with the finishing language and more down with the transition language of going from this to this, like, and then navigating that threshold between the two. So going from the shelves not being done to the shelves being done, there's a threshold there. It's like, now what, type of language that I think I'm thinking about more the next day after the interview.
Yeah.
Does that spark any thoughts for you guys?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. In high school and college, I was obsessed with the mindset of like leave it all out on the field. But I feel like ever since I started doing ultras, it has shifted my mindset towards life substantially. And I think it was in April I did this, my first 100K, and I think I shared on a podcast about, I think we were talking about baseline fitness. And I talked about after the race and going through the airport the next day and how I was like, limping, hobbling along, my feet were a wreck, but I still had a duty that day of like helping carry luggage or carrying my son, no matter how slow I went. And so I think the nature of the ultra, which is a completely different mindset in terms of enduring, that I appreciate a lot more. And I think it's more in alignment with what you're talking about, Evan, and that like there are only transitions from one journey to the next or different ecosystems, right? If you're doing a hike in the woods, you might see 5 different ecosystems, a rock field, or, really thick thicket, whatever it may be. And so I think that has been, over the last 10 years, something that I've really leaned into, and that I'm constantly building up my baseline fitness in every activity that I do, only so that I can do, the activities that I choose for a long period of time. And the other thing too, I realize that death isn't a huge motivator for me. Like it doesn't like I don't think about it a lot, which I don't know if that's like good or bad, but it's not not a motivator for me. So I think about it in terms of, I think more of what you're saying, this like journey and thresholds that are more, I don't know, motivating for me on my day-to-day life.
Tony, do you think about death?
Sure. Yes, probably. Well, Josh, when you say that, I guess what comes to mind is like having an awareness of death that, as opposed to, did I refer to this last week on when we recorded Milan Kundera's definition of kitsch, which is that which denies the existence of shit? That I think a lot of, I don't know if I should say a lot of people, I think there's a seductive quality to the idea of just ignoring the existence of death, that it doesn't exist, that it's something that happens to other people. And Tolstoy explored that uh, beautifully in The Death of Ivan Ilyich, where this guy just gets sick and he goes downhill and he dies, and it kind of tracks that experience. And this man, as he's descending, being like, I was fine like 2 weeks ago, and now why would this happen to me? Like, so like just that sort of lack of awareness that
Yeah.
death is something that's going to happen to you. Um, like I don't sit around thinking about my own death, but I do feel like a lot of my decisions, and particularly big decisions, are influenced by that reality. That
Yeah.
it's I'm trying to make the most of my life, because as far as I know, I get one shot at it, and there will be a finish line to the thing. Like, that's going to happen. And I want to make sure that right before that finish line, I can look back and say, I took a proper crack at it. And that definitely influences how I make my decisions.
Yeah. Maybe I should also clarify I feel like what you just shared helps bring clarity to my thoughts. But I think I'm more motivated by dying in life, not dying in life, meaning, right, I could show up for work dead to the world. And that I despise, right? I want to avoid that. I want to push that away. Like, I don't think I'm going to live forever. I feel like I'll have a shorter lifespan than probably others for whatever reason. But, being like showing up for my family and just being a zombie and not really alive, like that is a huge motivator for me. And I think influences my decisions more so than the transition to an afterlife. Whereas I'm hopefully preparing myself for that moment, but it's not that moment that is motivating me. It's to prevent those moments occurring in my day-to-day life.
The way that you talk about your ultra is very similar to the way that you talked about death now, which is something that comes to mind often for me, which is when I think about death, I'm less concerned with myself and more concerned with the people that are still alive, that I love and care for. So Josh, you finishing your ultra was less about, or maybe not less about, I should say, you were also thinking about the next day and walking through the airport and being able to carry luggage and be there for your family. it seems as though there's an aspect of finishing well in terms of life and death that's like, how can I still be there for my family, or and whatever that means, even after I'm gone.
Yeah. Tony actually helped me realize this with work with like all the stuff that he does for LinkedIn, helped me create a process. And as he was helping draw out what I enjoy talking about or writing about, a lot of it was lessons learned that my true motivator, if I was to look at it, is to be able to have an artifact or a series of artifacts that I can give to my children and say, you inspire me, right? These are the things that I learned from you. So anytime you're in the dumps, or if I'm not here or your mom's not here, you can go back to these things and remember how powerful, how amazing, how inspiring you are. And so I think what you just said, Evan, is a huge motivator in that, we can't control all the things that, when we're gone and out of this world, but hopefully we can make it a pretty tidy place, or as tidy as we can, and hopefully you know, leave bits and pieces of us for those that we leave behind.
You just gave me an idea for a project where I think I've told both of you about my Khalil Gibran's The Prophet video book idea.
Yeah.
I've thought about making my own. Like, I have in the back of my mind writing something like that, and then what you were just saying made me think, I should do a video book for my children that's my own writing, doing my best impression of Gibran. Ooh, yeah, that could be really good.
That could be really good. That will be really good.
It's going to be the greatest book ever.
There's so the future is wild based on looking at the last 50 years, just like how fast technology advances. And I've been listening to more and more podcasts on like the state of AI or automation and things like that. And people are using language models to upload conversations and writings of people that have died, and then having conversations with them as if they're still alive. And they're very meaningful to the people that are doing this. And they're like, it's oddly accurate as to how the person would respond. And I do think in 20 years or so, these things are going to be productized in services. And I don't know how I feel about that or not, but having recorded and published over 100 podcasts, me having conversations with people, I'm like, in the back of my mind, the more I can do this, the my if my kids or whoever could have a conversation or get an idea of what it would be like to ask me a question, it's very intriguing to me, and I don't know how I feel about it all, but it is like in the back of my mind as we record and publish podcasts, like what's going to be able to be done. I think there's more value in what we're doing here than we actually know.
Wow. I feel like I don't know how I feel about that either. My initial sentiment is both like, that's really intriguing and interesting. And then I also get an immediate, to use a word from Tony's sister about king energy, I feel like kind of icky at the same time. Like, man, that's really bizarre. But
All of that is going to change how we think about creating and what is real and what is art. I mean, our conception of those things is going to shift dramatically, like you're saying, Evan, in the next 20 years with the images, like video, audio, all of it. It's where we are crossing a threshold into another area where it's these tools are absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Which I choose to view them as opportunities for us to get better at our crafts, which I saw an argument to that effect recently. And I'm going to go with that, because to go the other direction where it's just dystopian and we
Yeah.
we can't trust anything, that's too depressing to really spend too much time. And so let's think about how we can effectively leverage them to make good things, nourishing things happen.
Yep.
My brother talks a lot about like visualization. So he was a F-15 pilot. He's a skydiving instructor now. And just the power of him thinking through his movements or how he was going to manipulate the jet. And so when Tony, you were talking, that it made me think of that, and that we do need to visualize the future and think about how we're going to respond to it, so that when we are in those moments, we're going off of, I guess, semi muscle memory, to be able to get into emotion rather than just like being absorbed into whatever the new craze is. So I think that makes me tie it back to the finishing well, in that there is a key element of thinking about how we're going to cross the finish line that is a motivator, or how we're going to cross this threshold, so that we do it with grace. We do it with knowing that my soccer coach used to say this: whenever you score, just act like you've been there before. You don't need to go crazy like you just won the World Cup, but just, you're a pro. And I just always admired that. But there is something about crossing the finish line, very, very exciting, but it is just a threshold. And there will be another race, there will be another journey. But we got to put ourselves in that moment before we ever get to that moment.
Yeah. You're reminding me of something that I believe is over a door at the tomb of St. Peter. It's inscribed in Greek. And Brian Muraresku as an author, he would say that this is the key to immortality, or the immortality key, this inscription, which is, if you die before you die, when you die, you won't die.
Oh, baby.
And there's a visualization aspect to that, and a very literal. I mean, I think you can take that in a lot of ways, but whenever I heard you talking about the visualization, it's like, if you score before you score, when you score, you won't score for soccer. Like, it is, you've been there before. You're navigating something that is familiar. So it doesn't need to be death. It can be something that's familiar and recognized as it's navigated, as our thresholds are navigated. So I'd like to leave us with that today.
Yeah.
If you die before you die, when you die, you will not die.
Oh.
Cool.